Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a beautiful Monday morning here in Kingston, Jamaica, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this World Alzheimer's Day webinar being hosted by Alzheimer's Jamaica in partnership with Mona Aging and Wellness Center and the Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work at the University of the West Indies. We are privileged to have the following persons with us this morning, from whom you'll be hearing at different points in today's program. Professor of Public Health and Aging and Executive Director of Mona Aging and Wellness Center, Professor Denise Eldemire Shearer. Head, Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work at UWI Mona Campus, Dr. Orville Taylor. Founder and Chair of the Board of Directors of Alzheimer's Jamaica, Ms. Dundeen Ferguson. Coordinator of Programs at Alzheimer's Jamaica, Ms. Sandra Latibodiere. Dr. Sharon McKenzie from the University of Minnesota in the USA, and Drs. Julian McCoy Davis and Keon Donaldson Davis, both lecturers here at Mona Aging and Wellness Center, UWI. Each year across the world, September 21 is recognized as World Alzheimer's Day, with the goal of raising awareness and challenging stigma surrounding the disease. In keeping with this year's theme, Let's Talk About Dementia, we have organized what promises to be an informative and engaging session. From wherever you're joining us across the world, once again, we're so very happy to have all of you. I now invite Dr. Orville Taylor to bring greetings on behalf of the Department of Sociology, Psychology and Social Work. He will be followed by Dr. Keon Donaldson Davis of Mona Aging and Wellness Center and Ms. Sandra Latibodiere of Alzheimer's Jamaica, who will also bring greetings on behalf of their organizations. Dr. Taylor? We're going to ask Dr. Keon Donaldson Davis to bring greetings, and we will hear from Dr. Taylor in a while.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Keon Donaldson Davis, and I'm a member of the team here at the Mona Aging and Wellness Center. Greetings and a warm welcome to all of you. For those of you who may not be aware, the Mona Aging and Wellness Center, we've been around for the past 15 years. We operate out of the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and we offer a wide range of interdisciplinary academic programs ranging from certificate to master's level. We also are aligned with both local and international governmental and non-governmental organizations, and we deal with issues related to aging and older persons. And also there are lots of research interests that we have, and we participate in a wide range of outreach activities that affect older persons and their families. So again, we welcome you. We thank you for being here this morning. We recognize that dementia affects older persons and their families, and this particular chronic illness has a unique effect on each individual, and it may affect these individuals differently. We thank you again, and we welcome you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night, because I know that people are joining us from different locations. It gives me great pleasure on behalf of Alzheimer's Jamaica to welcome you to our webinar on World Alzheimer's Day under the theme, Let's Talk About Dementia. So we're welcoming all our nurses in the house, our persons living with dementia in the house, our nurses, teachers, students, doctors, caregivers, and all interested persons. So why a theme? Let's talk about dementia. It's so important. It's important because we need to have a conversation in order for us to understand the disease. We know that the disease has many different dimensions, which our presenters this morning are going to talk about. It has legal, not only medical, but legal implications, financial implications, caring implications. Persons living with the disease and their families are also affected. So we are interested in it from different perspectives, because in talking about dementia, it also has inherent in it a factor of calling to action. We need to come to actions. Why do we talk about dementia? Why should we have a webinar about talking about dementia? Because dementia affects many different persons. Alzheimer's Disease International says that 46 million people worldwide are living with dementia. There is one new case every 3 seconds. The worldwide cost of dementia is US $818 billion. And most importantly, women are the primary caregivers. Many of them are unappreciated, invisible, doing all of this yeoman task without any recognition. So this is important for us to talk about dementia. And how can you assist us at Alzheimer's Jamaica? We need to take some little steps. We need to engage in our individual networks, talking about the disease and building relationships with other associations so we can do something about it. We need to change the language of how we talk about persons living with the disease and their family. Only in doing that will we be able to take active actions. We need to encourage our governments to develop a national dementia plan. Little steps, right? Dementia friend, become a dementia champion, become a dementia friend. So again, welcome, and I hope you will leave here energized and agitated to get involved in whatever way you can. Welcome again. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So we said we're going to talk about dementia, right? That's the whole reason we're all gathered here today. And I think one of the important places to start is getting through the fundamental issues so that we have a clear understanding of what we're talking about. So we are very happy to have Prof. Eldemar Shearer. She's going to lead us in the little segment that we have called Dementia 101. So we're going to get down to the basics. We encourage you to ask your questions. You can type them in the chat and we can get through to them so that you can have them addressed. This is your time now to answer those questions that you've always had in your mind. So Prof is going to take us through that. Yes, you are. So we're going to start at the beginning. Prof, what is dementia? When I was growing up, I used to hear people talk about people getting senile. Is that the same thing?
Almost. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Let me also reiterate what our chair said. If you have questions, type them in. We are willing to forego any questions that we may have here because this is your webinar and it's for you. I grew up also knowing that grandma or grandpa could be senile. In those days, it was grandma or grandpa that was senile, was what just sort of didn't know anything. But you could climb all over them, they were loving. You weren't afraid of them. And we just accepted that grandma or grandpa was going to be senile. Now we have a nice fancy name, it's called dementia. And we make it into this big thing as if people are no longer part of families and are no longer important in the lives of those people. Unfortunately, with us getting more sophisticated and calling it dementia, we've also acquired stigma along the way. Dementia is an umbrella term. There's no one type of dementia, or in terms of not everybody is the same. So that's important for people who are in support groups and in Alzheimer's Association. My experience with my mother or father could be different to yours. So it's about sharing. It's an umbrella term. It is a syndrome. Most importantly, it starts with a loss of functioning. Not everybody starts with memory loss. And not all memory loss is dementia. If you forget your keys, it's all right. Everybody will help you look for them. If I forget mine, I'm demented.
Why is that so?
Because we have now associated dementia with old age. And loss of memory or slowing down of memory in old age is not automatically dementia. For us in Jamaica, we know that 6% of our population will have dementia. But we also know 30 to 40% will have MCI, mild cognitive impairment, which just means I can't remember nothing.
So everybody doesn't have to get dementia.
No.
That's what you're saying. Once you're old, it's not a given.
It's not a given, and more importantly, we're talking about loss of, everybody associates it with memory loss, as I said. I would like you to refocus. I would like people to refocus as we talk about it. It's really a loss of thinking. Because when I ask you a question, or when I give you an instruction, because you know we like to give old people instruction. We pass our step plenty time and want to give people instructions. They can't process the instruction. So dementia, the loss of cognitive functioning that we see in dementia is more a loss of thinking. You tell me to go to the bathroom and I go to the fridge and get water. Those are the cues. Those are the sort of things that will tell you as a relative. They can't reason. And this, I want to stress the not reasoning, because all the arguing that you as the caregiver are doing with somebody with dementia is only frustrating you, because they cannot reason.
So how do you suggest that we respond to them when we're trying to be the best caregivers that we know how?
Stop giving instructions, stop shouting, and stop getting annoyed when they don't do what you want them to do. Because there is this, well, first of all, you need a diagnosis, because too many of us assume the person has dementia. So you need to be properly evaluated and you need a diagnosis.
So if I start seeing what I think are some strange, behaviors in my older person, how do I go about getting that diagnosis? What's the first thing that I need to do?
You speak to your doctor or your primary care provider. And I want to reiterate that. I had a case about maybe 6 weeks ago, where I was asked to evaluate somebody with clear-cut memory issues. As soon as he came into the office, the family came, it was clear to me this was sudden onset. He was not diabetic, so I knew that there were no fluctuations of sugar. But it was a very good day today. He was in my office, but I listened to the family. Key, because in the early stages, you're going to have good days and bad days. So if your primary care provider is not listening, try somebody else. And I said, I need a scan, because I'm not convinced this is dementia. He had stage 4 metastases from lung cancer. And his only presentation was memory and behavior. Now, had his family not wanted the diagnosis, they would have assumed he was demented.
So can we get a diagnosis the same day in your office? What does it look like? What's the process?
No, you won't get because, well, first of all, you need to bond with the patient. And you need to see the caregiver-patient interaction. I would say 3/4 of the caregivers are very protective. They're usually family members. So I need to shut them up, and I'm being blunt. I have threatened to ask them to leave the room. The only problem is that I need them there to nod their head or tell me if what the person is saying is right or wrong. Because when I'm interviewing somebody I suspect with dementia, there is no right and wrong, because it is their world. And I need to go to their world. I need to see things the way they see it. So for me, there's no right and wrong. But I need the caregiver to nod or whatnot. But so many of the caregivers are embarrassed, and I don't know why. So they start nudging them, correcting them, giving them hints. And I have to say, but you're not allowing me to assess.
Yes.
So if I ask what's the date, and somebody is telling me 1967, I don't want the caregiver correcting them, because in the early stages, they take up themselves. and things. So the caregiver is there just to help me. But so you do the assessment and then you will have a blood test to do
Okay.
because many of them have the comorbidities. We're talking about comorbidities a lot these days with COVID. There are a lot of comorbidities with dementia because these persons are often older. So there is diabetes. So is it sugar? There's blood pressure. Is their blood pressure too high? And remember, we have different types of dementia.
How about, yes, how can you go into some of those? Tell us about the different types.
Okay, but let me just finish that first one. No questions over there from the audience yet? Okay. Then, once we do the blood tests, we do a scan. The scan is very helpful because the scan leads into the next question you just asked. There are two predominant types of dementia. There are 8 or 9 dementias.
Hear that, guys? 8 or 9
8 or 9.
dementias.
There is vascular dementia, which means that there are problems with the blood vessels, strokes, bleeds, other form, cholesterol, high cholesterol, putting a whole heap of junk in our blood vessels, so that we have vascular dementia. We have Alzheimer's, which is there's plaques and tendrils. In other words, something is wrong in the brain and you get shrinkage.
Okay.
You also get combinations of the two. Then there is frontal lobe dementia. Frontal lobe dementia is very important for caregivers because your frontal lobe controls your behavior. So people with frontal lobe problems can behave very badly and they are very sexual. They will masturbate in public, they will do all sorts of things, and it is very distressing for the caregiver, especially when the caregiver is a child, because they've never seen their mother or their father walk around with an erect penis and be totally disinhibited. And I'm being frank because people, this is what happens. And especially if they're in hospital, there's no need to be embarrassed. The nurses do understand it and they have come to get it. There is Lewy body, which are little, as it says, little bodies in the brain. Now, interestingly enough, in North America, that's the second commonest type. Vascular is for us. And it's not surprising that we see a lot of vascular dementia because 70% of old people have hypertension, 30% have diabetes, and I think it's 16% with a combination. Half of us have high cholesterol. And that's the important one because whereas you can't reduce the Alzheimer's with the plaques and the tendrils and all of that, you can decrease your vascular problems by watching what you put in your mouth and what you do with your 2 legs. Called activity.
Or what you don't do.
Or what you don't do. Right.
Okay. So guys, remember, as you're listening online, please feel free to send your questions in. Professor Eldemar Shearer has had a long and distinguished career in medicine and research, and dementia is one of her key interest areas. She treats a lot of patients, and she has also led also the research coming out of Jamaica, still in embryonic stages. So this is actually your chance to speak with somebody who has first-hand information and experience in this area. So don't be shy, type in your questions, and we'll continue the discussion while we wait to see your questions pop up. So
one other point I want to make before you ask me your next question.
yes.
In the early stages of dementia, regardless which one, people can have very normal days. And caregivers often tell me, but they're being stubborn, they're being difficult, nothing is wrong with them. Because today they will be off the wall and tomorrow have a wonderful conversation. And there's one that I remember, I think of her all the time. She had a B12 actually deficiency, hence the blood test importance. And she did have hallucinations. And she had a brain tumor removed 10 years ago. So, and she used to have these very logical conversations with me. And the logical conversation was a man sat above her bed, pouring water through the ceiling. So she always had on a hat to stop the water. When I found out about the B12, I told her we had to give her some B12 injections, because I thought she wanted to get rid of the hallucinations. Turns out she didn't want to get rid of the hallucinations at all, it was the husband. So when she comes back now for her first shot, she says, I don't think this is a very good idea. If you get rid of my seeing the little man in the roof, how am I going to know when he's going to pour the water on me?
Oh boy.
Now that's a very rational discussion.
Yes, it is.
She did not finish the course, she actually stopped coming. So I guess she's still avoiding the man pouring the water on her.
So it's really an interesting manifestation because there are still some logical processes, reasoning that's going on. It's just very different from the world that we are operating in.
I had another one where people came through the window at 2 a.m. every morning, and it was always 2 a.m. After which he got out of the bed and told his wife to change the sheets because somebody else had been in his bed. So that part's very logical.
Thinking the sheets are now dirty, yes. So Miss Annie Watkins is monitoring our social media platforms, and she has a question from somebody. Could you share it with us, please?
Good morning. So Sharon McKenzie is asking, can you speak a little bit about medications?
Okay. Their medication for dementia should start early, which means early assessment. For Alzheimer's, there is specific medications. You have the anticholinesterases, which can help to slow down the process. I think one of the important messages is that we are attempting to slow down the process. You don't reverse what's there already. So the earlier that you start, the better. It can also help to modify some of the behavioral manifestations. Alzheimer's, as opposed to vascular, and I suspect in the earlier days that we were talking about, it was mainly vascular from the hypertension. Alzheimer's, one of the features of Alzheimer's is behavioral disturbances, aggression, boisterousness, and that aggression can actually be violent. So the anticholinesterases can help to modify behavior. Vascular, clearly you want to treat whatever is causing the vascular problem. So aggressive treatment of blood pressure, diabetes, etc. Now, in the aggressive management of blood pressure, you do not want to drop the blood pressure too low. Because it is going to reduce the oxygen to the brain, so you're going to have a further aggravation of the memory issues. Those are the two main things. Well, diabetes the same. And then you have medications for the symptoms. So every behavior can be treated, but you start from the premise that every behavior has a cause. Not just because people have a dementia, do you assume that it is the dementia just out of the blue causing them to be violent. And again, I'll illustrate. We had a man was brought to me, an old man, Chinese, and I'm giving his thing because there was a cultural element, who was very violent around bath time. So he was brought to me for sedation, etc. But he could still explain. Now, think about it. Caregivers are usually female. They can be quite young. This one was in a nursing home, so it was the nurse's aides. And the man told me he's not supposed to take his clothes off in front of a young girl. So his violence all had to do with, why are you making me do something that I should not be doing? They got the gardener to come in to help him, and they've never had another problem with him. Because a male coming in to help him bathe was acceptable. So try to find out what makes the person do what they're doing. You and I go through life, we don't like everybody we meet. We don't like all our relatives. We can love them and don't like them, So you have to, don't assume that the person is being bad. So behavior modification is number one. There are medications for the aggression, Clopixel and the various sedatives. Clopixel does have the risk of Parkinson-like syndrome, so you have to watch them. Although the doses that we use for the demented patient is about 100th of what you use for psychosis. And then you'll treat each thing. One of the things that bothers caregivers is sundowning. Persons with dementia, and let me declare my hand. I call people hypertensive, so I don't know why, as a doctor who loves them dearly, I'm not allowed to say a demented patient, because I do say a hypertensive patient and I do say a diabetic, but I'm told I'm being ageist and it's stigma. But I see it the reverse, because that's how I describe all my patients. Anyhow, I'm supposed to say a person living with dementia. So when you get them, you have to find out the why. No, they reverse their clock. So they sleep in the day and they pace all night. It's called sundowning. Now, because they have stayed up all night, they actually sleep during the day. The patients keep asking me to make them sleep at night. I cannot make them sleep at night. Their whole biological clock has been changed. So when I give them sedatives to make them sleep at night, they are at risk of falls. And then they still are droopy the next day. So the caregiver needs to learn, and families need to be tolerant. Families need to be tolerant. If the caregiver has been up all night doing what the caregiver is supposed to do and avoiding the person from hurting themselves, don't quarrel with them at 10 o'clock in the morning when they are sleeping, when the person is sleeping, because they can't do the housework by day and the caregiving by night.
Yes. Thanks for that. We have another question online.
So Mary Clark is asking, you mentioned behavior of frontal lobe. What is behavior of brain shrinkage?
Okay. Hello, Mrs. Clark. The behavior of brain shrinkage, and I know the reason for the question, in Alzheimer's, the hypothalamus, which controls memory, controls thinking, shrinks. This is when you get the abnormal behaviors in terms of just lying down, sleeping a lot. The aggression can come, but it's because the brain shrinkage is not stimulating the frontal lobe. So you're getting gaps in the communication between the parts of the brain. Now, in an Alzheimer's patient, the brain shrinkage they forget to eat. So the brain shrinkage can be very serious in terms of looking after the person. That's why they become incontinent, because they don't feel that they would like to pee. And then you have a real problem, which is one I'm having with my brother-in-law, or my sister is having, is that although they don't know, once it gets wet, they try to get up and then they fall. Because if the ground is wet around them. So it's loss of, frontal lobe is loss of inhibitions. Brain shrinkage is that some serious things that you need to do. So they will really call down disgrace on you, because everybody to visit, you haven't fed them for hours, even though they have just eaten. So I think the eating is a big problem. The continence is a big problem, because they lose that, so they become incontinent of both urine and feces. And that's part of the brain shrinkage. Towards the latter stages, when they begin to curl up in the bed, they could even forget to breathe, because the center, the hypothalamus has all of these important brain centers.
Okay, so you sort of alluded to it as you spoke, about the slowing down of some of the symptoms or the progression of the disease, and address the latter stage and so on. But if you could just present for us again, what can we expect, generally speaking, because we know there might be differences along the pathway from diagnosis until
The end?
the end?
Everybody's going to be different. So we can only share the journey.
Yes.
And sharing the journey is critical. So I'm a big believer in support groups, because a lot of people think that I'm the only one in the world that's having this experience. In the early stages, it's very frustrating because you have these wonderful days of normal life. And remember, particularly for the one with vascular dementia, they still love it. Also, put yourself in the position of a person with early dementia. They know something's wrong.
Yes.
So they get angry, they get frustrated, they get depressed. So they can be very miserable. And all the literature says you take that out on the one you love the most. So they're going to turn on the caregiver. Now, if the caregiver is a non-family member, they can also love the caregiver. And so family members get jealous. Okay, so that's early. Some books tell you there's 7 phases, some tell you 9. For me, there's 3. There's early, middle, and late. And then the different phases are within that. So early is 1 and 2, middle, right. When you so in the early phases, they can actually maintain a lot of normal life. So men will continue to go to work because whatever they used to do by routine, so if they've done something for 40 or 50 years, they will continue to do it. The same for driving, which is a problem because then they can forget where they are. So it's really more of a memory manifestation. Although they have these other things, they may have little accidents, they may wet themselves. And of course, they didn't do it. Remember that when they pee somewhere and they are wet, they didn't do it. So remember, don't argue with them.
Right.
Middle, now you begin to see the manifestations. They forget to eat, the aggression can come in. They're quite difficult. Let us be honest in this, let's talk about Alzheimer's. Looking after an Alzheimer's person is not, or any demented person is not an easy task. It can be a rewarding task because you can see the joy when they grab onto you, but there are times. Now, in that middle phase, part of the difficulty is they start not recognizing people. So a son will come or a daughter that they haven't seen regularly and who is that? What is that stranger doing here? And it's very hurtful. And then you begin to see the other things. You will see the muscle wasting because you can't get them to do various things. You will see the pacing where they walk up and down. And then you move into the final stage where the systems begin to shut down. In the first phase, they actually also can become very withdrawn. Because as one person said to me, I never remember, and I don't remember the name. And of course, there can be a lot of family war because you told your mother that your sister got married in the States, but your mother doesn't remember, and you're the evil one for not telling her. So a lot of this goes on, and that goes on in the middle phases as well. But the last phase is actually easier for the caregiver. Because by then the person usually becomes bedbound, usually doesn't stop speaking, and it's really physical care as for a stroke or anything else.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that information. And I'm just going to let the guys online know that you can prepare additional questions because at the end of our second presentation, we're going to pause for some questions and answers. So hold those questions until we get to that point. So thanks for sharing that, Prof. I think it is indeed a difficult thing to have to do. I don't have first-hand experience, but I have close to first-hand experience, and it is difficult. But I think when we're armed with information, it makes it easier on everybody, and we provide the kind of care that we want to do for our loved one.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure, Prof.
Don't argue with them.
Don't argue.
Don't argue with them because you're not going to win an argument. Because remember what I said with reasoning? And
Yes.
just remember that they're going to forget that you had this conversation within 10 or 15 minutes. So what's the point of having a fight about bathing?
Yes.
Come back in half an hour and say, let's bathe.
And they might just very well get
That's
up and go.
right. Don't argue with them,
Yes.
please.
Yes. Thank you so very much for that. We really appreciated that frank talk about what dementia is, what it looks like, and how to deal with some of those issues. We are going to invite Ms. Dundee Ferguson now to speak with us on legal implications for persons living with dementia and their caregivers. Let me just tell you a little bit about Ms. Ferguson. She's an attorney at law, lecturer, and a social activist who advocates for nonviolence against women and for the health and well-being of persons living with disabilities. She founded Alzheimer's Jamaica shortly after her own mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2001. She also wanted to facilitate education and resource sharing focused on how to care for loved ones living with the disease. She wanted to and still wants to advocate for Alzheimer's disease being a national priority for the Jamaican government and to raise awareness for families and members of the community about certain behaviors, including wandering, that many persons with the disease show. So Ms. Ferguson is in the perfect place to speak to us about these legal implications. Ms. Ferguson, over to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good
It's,
morning.
I'm glad to be here and to share. And as always, listening to Professor Eldemire always overwhelms me. But I thank her for participating this morning. Um, if you can see my screen, I had a little quotation I have for Alzheimer's Jamaica, which says, "Help and hope that brings color to life." It's what we want to do with our loved ones. Um, and if you're seeing, there's a picture of my mom with my sister. I recall that picture being taken when he was about 75 years old at the time. Um, and we were sitting outside at the home where she is. The mission of Alzheimer's Jamaica is to provide support services for persons living with Alzheimer's disease and dementia related disorders, families and caregivers, and to raise public awareness, part of what we are doing now. I just want to share with you Keith Turner, who we made an honorary member when he visited Jamaica in 2007. And there is Keith, and to his right is his wife Lillian, and of course Zeta, who has worked with the group for a number of years. That year, the theme was for World Alzheimer's Day was No Time to Lose. The lessons I learned, I just want to share, not legal, but he came to help us with our campaign to raise awareness. He's a retired chiropractor, and he worked with Alzheimer's Disease International to raise awareness across communities, and he was living with dementia. He told me he was not suffering with Alzheimer's disease. He is living with it, because I made the mistake of doing an introduction and just talk about people suffering, and he made the point, no. So we had a health fair, moving right along. This is mommy. This was her 70 or 75th or 80th birthday. I've lost time, but that is, I wanted to show the picture, not of my pretty self, but more of my mother. And in this state, eyes are more closed than open. Dementia and the law. People do not realize that Alzheimer's is not old age. It is a progressive and fatal disease, and staggering amounts of people develop Alzheimer's every day. So there are 10 warning signs, and you've heard them from Professor Eldemire as well. Memory loss that affects day-to-day function, difficulty performing familiar tasks, problem with language, disorientation to time and space, poor or decreased judgment, problems keeping track of things, misplacing things, change in mood, changes in personality, loss of initiative. Now we go to the planning list. Who will be the substitute decision maker for financial matters or legal matters when the person is unable to do so? So we ask the question, does the person have a will? Is there a power of attorney? Is there a guardianship order? These are things that we need to be mindful of, and family members as well. Family caring for loved ones are often faced with challenges, how to take care of them. And here, I'm just pretty much going to take in how much you care for your loved one on the legal side of things. So I looked at three legislations, the Mental Health Act, the Disabilities Act, which was just passed in 2014, and the Nursing Homes Act. Um, Pardon me if you hear a bird chirping. That's my pet, and I think he thinks that I'm ignoring him. The Mental Health Act. Persons living with dementia or Alzheimer's disease can be described as persons living with a mental disorder. I often talk about it that they want to refer to persons with this condition as being mad. And I say to them, they're not mad. They just don't know what they're doing because, as you hear, they're losing their blood cells, their cells in their brain. And so what they will know, which they knew 10 years ago, they wouldn't know now. So they're not mad. So mental disorder sound like you're talking about a mad person. But the definition says it's a disorder of thought, perception, orientation, or memory, which grossly impairs a person's behavior, their judgment, their capacity to recognize reality, or ability to meet the demands of life, which renders a person to be of unsound mind. A substantial disorder of thought, perception, orientation, or memory, which impairs, and I'm just repeating it, of unsound mind. The Disabilities Act says a person with disability, or in the context requires persons with a disability, includes a person who has a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which may hinder his full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. Caregivers, I just pick items out of the legislation which is of importance. Your caregiver can be a parent, a legal guardian, or any other person responsible for the caring for the health, financial, physical security, and general well-being of a person with a disability. And then I go on to the Nursing Homes Act. Nursing home means any premises used or intended to be used for the reception of and the providing of nursing for persons suffering, I don't like that word, but suffering from any sickness, injury, or infirmity, and includes a maternity home, but does not include any public or regional hospital under the National Health Services Act, or premises maintained or controlled by a local authority, a psychiatric facility within the meaning of the Mental Health Act. Consent is important if decision is being made for a person to be placed in a nursing home. So who can apply for a court order? And you have a long list here. Husband or wife, a son or daughter, mother, father, a brother or sister, grandparent or grandchild, uncle or aunt, nephew or niece. So the legislation provides who are the persons who can go to court to get an order to care for somebody with dementia, Alzheimer's disease. Consent. A patient shall not be given treatment in a psychiatric facility without his consent unless a duly authorized medical officer certifies that the patient's mental condition is such that he is not competent to give consent. Where a patient is unable to give consent to treatment, consent shall be given by the patient's nearest relative. So you see, we have persons who need to be involved. Section 15 looks at the role of a police officer. Where a constable finds any person in a public place or wandering at large in such manner or under such circumstances as to indicate that he is mentally disordered, the constable may, without warrant, take such person in charge and forthwith accompany him to a psychiatric facility for treatment. We'll look at that if it really works. Where an offense is committed by a person who appears to a constable on reasonable grounds to be mentally disordered, the constable A may charge that person for the offense and bring him before a resident magistrate at the earliest opportunity, being not more than a period of 5 days after the date on which the offense is committed. He may, where it's necessary, to detain the person until he is brought before the resident magistrate, detain him in a lockup, remand center, or a place suitable for the detention of mentally disordered persons. The shall, where the person is charged on the paragraph previously mentioned or detained, make a report in writing to a prescribed person within 24 hours of such charge or detention. So all here we talk about the role of the police officer if he happens to hold on to someone he thinks may be mentally disoriented. So the resident magistrates before whom the person is brought shall call to his assistance a medical practitioner employed to a public psychiatric facility and may summon witnesses, and if on examination of such person and having regard to the opinion of the medical practitioner, it appears that the person is mentally disordered and that he should be detained in a psychiatric facility, the resident magistrate may, by order, direct such person to be conveyed to and detained in a public psychiatric facility. The examination of the person, if necessary, that is the case, may be adjourned from time to time for a period in the aggregate not exceeding 10 days. Remember that, folks, not exceeding 10 days, during which time he shall be detained in a lockup, remand center, or a place suitable for the detention of mentally disoriented persons. I want you to remember this news item. Man freed after 50 years in prison without trial. The man was at the General Penitentiary where it is reported he was a mentally disabled person. How could this happen? After I've read all that you've heard about the role of the police officer and the assistance dealing with someone who seems to be mentally disoriented, how do you, and if the person was brought before the court and you recognize that this person has a deficiency mentally, how do you end up without a trial? 50 years. It's frightening. So I asked the question, how could this happen? If the law was followed, this should not have happened. And what if the man was displaying symptoms of dementia? Because persons are often seen, then they display the behavior, which you've heard Professor Eldermeyer describe, may think that they're mad. So when they go in and have this mental issue, they need to be assessed by a doctor and determine if they're either mad or they have dementia. How do you treat with it? And if you're brought before the judge and they say, yes, you have to have trial and the person is mentally disoriented, 10 days, 50 years in our system. They're not following the law. I'm sorry that I sound so annoyed. So we've gone through the legislation. Now we're here. We often talk about instances where dealing with their last will and testament. Family members have to be proactive to take steps if there are early signs of dementia or they suspect it. An individual can have a will prepared disposing of real estate, meaning land, or personal estate, which means everything else, jewelry, your clothes, your books, whatever it is that you may have. The law requires that you have two witnesses. You don't have a problem. In the bookstore, they have last wills and testament that persons will get, and they just write it and able to let their loved one sign in the presence of two witnesses. The persons who are signing as witnesses don't have to know what's in the will. They only have to see the person signing, and then they witness that they saw Dundee and Ferguson sign the will, and they do it. So we have their last will and testament. Why you do that? It prevents, if the person passes on and they have a will, how their property is to be disposed. It was done when they had a clear mind and understood who they wanted to leave particular property to. And so when you see your loved one going through little things and they're still a little bit coherent and so, then you can assist with them doing a will. And stop with this notion that says when people prepare their will, it means they're going to die. They think that if they prepare the will, they'll just drop down and dead. Sorry, but that's not how it is. You can prepare your will and you can have it sitting down there for the next 50 years until you die. But you want to make sure that your house is put in order. Now we look at a power of attorney. Some persons prepare a power of attorney. All Jamaicans should be well aware of this term and what it means. The power of attorney is a document which lawfully allows the appointed individual to carry out legal transactions on behalf of the person who made the appointment. The person making the appointment is called the principal or donor. When the donor is unable to make informed health decisions because of mental or physical limitations, in such cases, a power of attorney is arranged before the donor develops such limitations. May have little signs, you do a power of attorney so that it gives instructions to someone to take care of the business while they're incapacitated. When a land or business owner resides overseas, he is unable to travel to the country where his land or business is located to manage the property. He or she can prepare a power of attorney. There are several different types. A general one, the appointee can conduct any kind of business for the donor. Limited, it means the donee, the person who wants to inform the person to do for them specific things. So your authority is limited to these things, nothing more. And then you have what they describe as springing. The appointee can act on behalf of the donor upon the occurrence of a specific event, such as the donor becoming physically or mentally disabled. So you have three types. Most instances, persons do a general, which means if the person who they have instructed to act for them, they can do what they see is necessary for the individual. Most do general rather than limited and springing, but just so that you are aware of it in the event you're faced with this position. So we have those. The document should be drafted by the donor or a qualified legal practitioner and should outline the names of the participants as well as the conditions and the duration of the agreement. And it is to be signed by the donor and a person appointed, which would be verified by a justice of the peace. So it's the donor and the appointee who will be signing. I'm appointing you, you accept, you sign, and you're doing it before a JP. You see the difference with signing the will? You sign the will, do whatever you're doing. The witnesses witness your signature. That's it. Out of the business. The power of attorney, you're appointing the person to act for you. You and the person will sign, and it's before a JP. So you just have a little distinction there. It requires in Jamaica visiting your Inland Revenue Department. That's over, I was going to say in Spanish Town, but it's outside, that big where you go and get your birth certificates. And so before they start setting up local offices, you stamp it just to make it legitimate, and you have it registered so that once the steps are completed, you pick up and you have your power of attorney, which is registered. A guardianship order. Guardianship can be required when a person with Alzheimer's or dementia is no longer able to legally sign a power of attorney document due to mental incapacitation. The application is made to the court by a caregiver. You prepare an affidavit setting out the circumstances why you need an order to be able to be the guardian of my loved one, to protect the assets, and to be able to dispose of it in the interest of the person you're taking care of. It requires you do the affidavit which sets out the circumstances, and you do a medical report, which will be good if you get it, and it will assist the court in making a decision. In this particular instance, you go before the court. The application, you sit before a judge to indicate that you need to be appointed. uh, I did an application in Jamaica. The judge was very good in going through and asking questions to get a guardianship order for my mom. And uh, it felt strange to me because at the time in Jamaica I was doing it, but in Canada, where my mom is, my elder sisters have power of attorney to make decisions concerning her welfare. So back in Jamaica, I had to work on it. And sometimes there are some challenges that we face as loved ones having to deal with legal stuff and dealing with the different institutions in Jamaica. I had a situation where I had a guardianship order visiting a bank to indicate I have this order and which sets out what I can do in the circumstances, getting my mom's name on an account, open an account so that she can get her pension. And it was a hazard. It was a hazard getting them to understand that this is a court order. Look at what it says here. I'm appointed to take care of my mom's business. She has Alzheimer's disease. Don't even need to tell them that. The judge says I can open a bank account. Why are you giving me a problem opening a bank account with my name on and my mom's name on so that when she gets her pension checks, it's in her name. It's not in my name. It's in her name, and I will be able to lodge it in an account. I have the capacity then to be able to draw funds to do what needs to be done for her. Why is that a problem? And it really was. So you talk about some of the challenges that I know and am aware of, number of persons across Jamaica are faced with. And the one thing that I forget to put in this presentation, and I know we are limited with time, is the fact that how many loved ones know the steps they take to visit the pension office, because I know with the pension, you get the booklet where you go to the post office and you get your money. So sometimes when you go to the post office, you see elderly persons in a long line. Normally, I think on a Thursday, go to collect money with their books. And you get money for them. How many know that they can apply to get assistance from the government? Some will know if they get the pension, they know it. Your loved one has worked in the system, they get a pension. If they work for private companies, you can also go to them and ask if your mom or your dad or your aunt, whoever it is, was on a pension plan, what is there for your loved one. So you have to be vigilant to know what your rights are, what are some of the things that you can do, what are some of the things that you can put in place to ensure that later on you won't run into too much problems. But we know that we have challenges. And I just want, in coming to the conclusion here, think about the headline with the man 50 years in prison. It's something that we have to look at to see how best we can work with the justice system, work with prison, the men, knowing that they do have persons, doctors who work with the system, and also have work with the judges as well. Because if you have a situation which says 10 days and 10 days lead to 50 years, there's a problem. The DPP if it's a criminal thing, you brought him here because he might have done something that was criminal. If they go to court the first time and it's adjourned, why is it left nothing done? That the gentleman is put in lockup and he doesn't get a trial. What about his rights? It pains me seeing that. I don't know if he had dementia, but what if he did? Displayed is mentally, you say he's mentally ill. Deal with it. Help the persons. It becomes part of our responsibility. So that's where we are. Thank you very much for listening.
So Dundee, there's a question here from Miss Kimberly Hines. She's asking, can you please explain what's meant by power of attorney?
The power of attorney is just a document that you give someone, authorize someone to act on your behalf. So you give them that power to do legal matters for you, to control what you have. So it's, remember, if somebody is independent of you, they can't go into a bank or they can't go into an office to do anything for you or do it as if they know to do it without your authorization. So your authorization is required. And so you get that document to ensure that someone can do it for you who you trust if you're incapacitated.
Thank you. And could you say what the guardianship is?
You're a caregiver. Or sorry, the guardianship, you're caring for your loved one. So you can get the power to say you are a guardianship of this person and you have the right to do certain things.
Okay.
That's just pretty much what it is.
Of the two things you just explained, the guardianship and the power of attorney, which would be the better for someone on early onset of dementia?
Either one should be appropriate. The guardianship order is almost similar as a power of attorney, just that the power of attorney would have been made when the person was pretty much aware and can sign, document. The guardianship is more, you now realize that you need to make it legal so that whatever you're doing is approved by the law and you won't run into problems. And I tell you, you have family members who will fight, you know. And I remember long ago in my profession, I was asked to assist an individual about dealing with the assets of her loved one.
Okay.
And I had to apply for guardianship order because you had to give this person who is protecting their loved one from other relatives who they're only concerned about the assets and want their hands on it. And she had to apply for it to maintain those properties because her loved one was not doing such a good job of it. So when you see things like that, then you will go and do it, and it's really personal that you are protecting the person.
Thank you so much, Dandine. I have one last question for you.
Go ahead.
Ms. Hunt, you may go ahead and ask your question. Andrea?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I have a question. I just wanted to know, where can someone access all this information? Would it be the primary care physician, or do I have to find a lawyer? It's wonderful information, but how does one access it?
Thank you, Andrea.
And so surely you need access it. If you think that you need assistance, in most occasions you can speak with an attorney at law that can give you directions legally, what you will put in place to protect your loved ones legally for during the period that they will be incapacitated to do it themselves. So one would ask that that be done.
Okay. Final question, and this is it for Ms. Dundee, because we have other presenters. Can anyone other than a relative apply for any of these?
If it's someone that I think they can, but then again, the court will be concerned about who are you, not seeing that the person is a caregiver, a family member, that you would want to do that. But I think in Jamaica, you do have instances where persons don't have a family member around, and they may disclose that, and they can get to ask that they be appointed to take care of these persons. We have that, a lot of that. So they will just ask for proof and how they will be able to manage. I hope I answered that. That makes sense. But you do have it based on our culture.
Yes, thank you so very much, Ms. Ferguson, for presenting to us information regarding the legal framework in which we can pursue some of these actions, and also for your practical advice and your own experience in what you went through. So thank you very much for this useful information. Thank you for your questions online, guys. Thank you for staying engaged. At this time, I am going to ask Dr. Orville Taylor to speak. He's bringing greetings on behalf of the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work. He is the head of that department here at the UWI. Dr. Taylor.
And good morning, how are you?
We are doing well.
I'm not sure if my video is up. I was trying to get it on.
No, it's not.
My video is off.
Yes, it is.
All right, you can enable it if you wish, but that's okay. But let me just say, there's like so many of the initiatives that have taken place over the last few years. I'm very delighted to be associated personally, not simply because I'm the head of the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work, but precisely because I'm a human being living in a country called Jamaica, and part of the CARICOM region, where we do have the capacity to handle the questions, first of all, that have to do with how we relate to each other. Many times the solutions are so simple that we walk past them. And one of the wonderful things about the work that is taking place now is it is where research meets praxis and where praxis meets practice. So the funny thing is, we live in an environment where we can boast about a number of achievements. It bothers me deeply, though, that we have in our legislature across the CARICOM, but in particular in this country that I live, Labour parties, 2 Labour parties. Even more so, that we have social security legislation that is 54 years old. Not to also forget that a whole range of labor laws have been passed. We have seen a significant aging of the population. When I was a young man, which is a long time ago, the average life expectancy of the average Jamaican was somewhere in the late 50s, meaning that I would have probably been dead already. looking at where we are now, you're talking about mid-70s, and for a woman it's almost 80. Yet, what we have not found is that the laws have kept up with it. In this country, based on the practice that we have, we don't have large percentages of the working population having pension schemes. We have an Unemployment Termination and Redundancy Payment Act of 1974 that deals with redundancies. However, there is nothing in place to prevent a person from dying of hunger if the employer simply doesn't have the ability to pay. We also find a number of other gaps, because for all of the negotiation and for all of the labor laws that we have passed in this country, we still have not seen compulsory pension provisions. So isn't that a paradox? We're boasting about how paradoxically, what is happening is larger percentages of the population are living longer, but at the same time having all kinds of chronic illnesses. So what I'm happy about is that we are keeping a positive gaze on this, and we are moving out of our intellectual high towers where many people love to live and rub shoulders and pat themselves on the back about the exclusive work that they have done as they do their peer reviews and are happy among themselves. We have a group of people here who are trying to make a difference. And I want to encourage you and I will participate and give as much support as I can. True, of course, I feel a great sense of pride because it is connected to the department that I work in. But more importantly, because a set of sensible people in this country are trying to deal with something that everybody else, or rather a large percent of the population, is ignoring. God bless you.
Yes. Thank you so very much, Dr. Taylor, for those encouraging words. We do feel a little bit, spurred on, a little bit more spurred on. So thank you so very much. We are going to be hearing from Julian McCoy Davis in a little while. Dr. McCoy Davis has worked in the field of aging for perhaps the last 10 years or more, but you could never tell by looking at the young, beautiful face that is going to replace mine in a minute. She has done a lot of work in advocacy and outreach for older persons and has research interest in the matters of finance as it relates to older persons and those who are vulnerable. So I'm going to invite Dr. McCoy Davis now to speak to us on Alzheimer's and finance.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome. I know we've been having a great morning so far, and I'm very delighted to be here. I just want to recognize today being World Alzheimer's Day, and especially persons who you have a relative living with the condition, or you are living with the condition. Just want to recognize you this day. So for today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about Alzheimer's and finance. So Alzheimer's and finance. Alzheimer's is a big issue. I know you'd have spoken a lot about that in detail, about what Alzheimer's is, and so I don't need to do that. But just to say that by the time you combine Alzheimer's and you're thinking through money issues, we're talking about really big issues. So financially, a dementia diagnosis is one of the most devastating prognosis that persons can have. And for many families, the implications are not visible until they look in the rearview mirror. So it's not something that you're going to naturally see in the beginning, but eventually you will start seeing the issues that Alzheimer's present. And so in fact, one of the biggest issues that Alzheimer's present is the issues as they relate to care and the need for care and support services for the person who is living with Alzheimer's.
So we recognize that Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, means that it gets gradually worse. And so it means that over time, you're going to have an increase in the level of care and support that is required. The increased demand of care services implies greater cost in terms of the value of these services. And so there are a number of factors that can cause the cost to vary. For example, depending on where you are located, caregiver services may differ. So somebody who's in a rural area in comparison to somebody in an urban setting, the cost of care services, the cost to have a caregiver, for example, may differ. The type and intensity of care that is required. So somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's, for example, may not require intense care in comparison to somebody who is in advanced stage and may require 24-hour care and support. Some persons may require assistive and supportive devices, for example, wheelchair, special kind of bedding and all of that. That, for example, may be something that can be very costly. The qualification of caregivers would determine, for example, the amount of money that you'll be required to pay. Another big ticket issue is whether or not we are providing home care or the person is being placed in a facility. That determines different types of costs that are involved. And also, if you're thinking about somebody that is being placed in a facility, know what happens in the facility determines the cost of the services that you pay for. So if it's somebody who's just going to be placed in a facility and that's it, then that may be relatively affordable. But when you're thinking about a facility, for example, that requires memory care services, they have ongoing intervention, they have physio, rehab and all of that, then it means the care will increase. And so some of the common costs that persons experience, for example, is regular follow-up visits for the doctor, as well as medication, caregiving services, personal care supplies, assistive devices, maintenance of equipment. There may also be costs associated with respite care, or if persons are going to daycare facilities. There's also the cost to retrofit the home, for example, to put in grab bars, handrails, surveillance camera in some instances, wheelchair, accessible bathroom, as well as there are other miscellaneous out-of-pocket expenses. For the family, there may be other costs associated as well when you have to think about there are some family members who the caregiver may in fact be a family member and that person may give up their job in order to provide care for this relative. So it implies career disruption, it means loss of wages, as well as other out-of-pocket costs. So in order to be able to plan your future effectively, healthcare planning is very important. And so we have to fit that in nicely with what you do in terms of your financial planning as well. So the future health conditions are things that are uncertain and you're not sure sometimes how to plan, because when we think about Alzheimer's, we think about it in terms of a long-term condition, possibly, depending on at what stage you recognize the situation. So it means that we may not be able to know everything to a T, to cost everything to a T, but you really have to be thinking long-term. I know there are some jurisdictions, for example, overseas, that they have long-term care health insurance, which is something that we don't see here in Jamaica, but it's something very important to be able to have insurance or other financial options to be able to provide that kind of care. There are also the option, for example, of having a living will, which is a will that, although the person is alive, it gives some kind of directive and instruction as to what it is that persons would want, how they would want to be treated while alive, for example, in terms of their healthcare services. And so in situations, it may be important to identify a healthcare proxy. I know we had a legal session before, and so you may have discussed those kind of issues in terms of power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and identifying that is important to have somebody else to take on that kind of responsibility. So I brought up a number of costs earlier, but I'm also conscious that for these kinds of costs, there may be multiple sources of income that have to work together to provide that kind of support. So from the individual perspective, there may be private pension, personal assets, for example, someone may have had savings, planning for retirement, also real estate is something that is a key value in situations like this. Insurance and wages. The government also has different financing options. For example, if the person was a government employee, they could have had retirement benefits. There's also social security of the national insurance scheme. And if the person is a NIS beneficiary, then there is NI Gold that can contribute to a certain extent. We also have relief in regard to prescription medication in the cost of the National Health Fund and Jamaica Drugs for the Elderly Person, JADEP. Depending on the social status of the person, whether or not they are able to really provide care and support, there are other social services available, such as the Program of Advancement through Health and Education. There are employer options, for example, if the person have a work retirement benefits from the employer, as well as there are other options, family, friends, there are social networks, the social support groups, such as the churches, community groups, and clubs. The point I'm making is that in terms of Alzheimer's, the cost can be very huge. And so what is important is for persons to be able to recognize their context, the social support groups, the network, and to be able to access the kind of funding and support that they can to take them through the process. I want to interject here because there is the young onset dementia. And so we're not just talking about older persons here who are affected by this condition. We're talking about persons who are younger than age 60. And there was a study in 2017 that revealed that young onset dementia, and especially frontotemporal degeneration, can cost approximately twice the average annual cost associated with Alzheimer's. So I'm saying that to say that we're not just talking about older persons and the cost that can come there. We're talking about, we're moving beyond Alzheimer's now, we're talking about dementia, and we're talking about some of the costs that can be involved, and to recognize that under age 60, it's important to have had some kind of discourse, to make some kind of plans. We just have to have this backup plan, that in the backup plan, we don't know the details of the plan because we don't know what we're gonna face with, we don't know what life will bring us. But what if you have a relative that is thrown in the situation of young onset dementia? Then basically what the study is saying, that in this case, persons can end up spending twice the amount of money that somebody would normally have spent with Alzheimer's. So it's very important to think about that context. Just to give a little snippet here, this is a popular author, her name Nancy Carson. She says, by the time the doctors diagnosed her husband with that condition, a little known form of dementia that can strike people under age 60, the damage, both physical and financial, had already been done. Once affable and organized, her husband had become irritable and erratic. He'd taken out tens of thousands of dollars in loans that he couldn't pay back, racked up an astronomical credit card debt, and owed a lot of bank taxes. The point is, sometimes when persons are faced with situations like this, in terms of the condition, the mental health condition, sometimes they don't tell their closest relatives what is happening to them. Sometimes they can't explain what is happening to them. And so they are trying to make ends meet. They're trying to fix everything. And so they may start engaging in some erratic financial behavior. They may just start spending, using credit cards. They may be influenced by others. So it's very important to kind of keep checking in terms of what would have happened in a situation like this. It's quite possible to start engaging others and start even collecting funds, begging persons for loans. And that is something that in the case of this person, her husband has died and her finances are still out of whack. So it's something that, family and community really need to come together to assist persons when they recognize that they're going through these situations. And so I just want to provide some kind of warning signs in terms of some of the things that can happen. Some persons living with Alzheimer's may not understand money as the disease progresses. So this may be a man or a woman, old and adult, living with the condition, living with Alzheimer's, who today, this morning, you gave the person $5,000. And then it is now 11 o'clock and you ask them for the money that you gave them to hold for you because it's now time for you to pay the bill, or you actually reach the supermarket and you want to pay for the grocery. What money? No money. There is no money. Because for an older person, they can easily well give away that fund. Somebody can just casually walk up to you and say, Papa, and this is something that typically as Jamaicans we do. Elder, big man thing. One sister, I'm really not depend on this man, can't beg her food. And this man just rolls, or woman rolls out the money, hands over the money, not even recognizing the value of the money. Sometimes the color of the money don't make a difference. Typically you would have said the money is blue, but when you really think about it, they would have actually handed over a share like an orange money. So, we really have to be careful. We really have to be careful about our seniors and just in general, persons living with Alzheimer's. We have to be able to recognize the changes and that they have difficulties in understanding, for example, money. They have difficulty calculating, they're not understanding some of the things that are happening around them. So some of the things we want to do is to discourage them from using credit cards or undertaking major transactions. If possible, you can have a discussion, and if you come to an agreement, it would be nice, for example, to close the credit cards account. That would be in your best interest. And the point I'm making is that while they do not understand money, they still want to have that level of independence. So what do you do? What can you do? You want to give them some money. One of the ways of giving them money, you take $1,000, you have that $1,000 broken down into smaller units. So you give them how many $100, and in the $100, you might want to give them some 50. So they're seeing variations in money, and they have all of that together. Of course, a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's going to stack up to be a lot of money, but it's just $1,000. It's just $1,000 in comparison to if it was $5,000. So you really want to do that because you still want them to have a sense of independence. For an older adult who's always giving money, for example, to a grandchild or to persons to buy stuff, you still want them to have that sense of independence to be able to know that they still can make a contribution, but you don't want them to be able to give away their life savings because they don't understand what they're doing. Another point is that because of that situation of where they are and them not understanding money fully, for example, they can be exposed to financial abuse. And so sometimes the persons who are the ones who are perpetuating, who are really pushing them or putting them in the position to have this happen are sometimes people who are very close to them, people who really know them, family members, relatives, and sometimes it comes from strangers that are very much exposed in terms of what is happening now in terms of the scammers. The scammers are targeting particularly older persons who, they may observe them for a while or may not from far distances, but you observe behavior, and so they're targeting them. As family members, as support, whatever group you're from, you have to be able to provide a protective space for persons who are living with the condition. You want to share that information with them, and as much as possible, you want to protect them from these possibilities. So you want to be very vigilant to observe what is happening with them, and also to recognize that a lot of older persons, a lot of persons who are living with Alzheimer's, they may be trapped in terms of them being able to handle their situation based on the unscrupulous persons that would seek to target them. And so you want to be able to kind of give them that kind of support to buffer them as they go through. You want to have adequate support system in place. And sometimes it can be tricky because, you know, these are persons who have been independent, who have managed their finances for all their life. And we are not talking about scammers. We're talking about sometimes these scammers, in fact, being your family member. The big question is then, is whom I must trust? Who do you really trust? And so it brings me to a point I should have raised earlier, that when it comes to money, when it comes to finances and your health, as we recognize that the disease is progressive and that persons with the condition may not be able to make executive decisions over time, you want to have had this discussion very early to really know who it is that they feel comfortable handing over their financial business to. Another point is in terms of undue influence, and we may see that again in terms of influence persons may have provoked in terms of a last will and a testament of the person. It is possible all of a sudden you recognize that there was a will, or you may not even recognize until the person passes that this will has changed. And so, especially persons who are involved in the process, the executors, if it is that, you know, you, and also family members, you recognize that the person is having this condition, you want to be careful about the support. You want to be careful about the person around them so that after the person dies, you don't recognize at that stage that everything has been revoked in the previous wills and handed over to someone else. So if you're not really sure what to do, we encourage you to seek professional advice, to report it to the police, and maybe to follow up, for example, if legal persons were involved in the original framing of the will. So we also recognize that there are emerging concerns given our current situation of digitizing services that older persons are accustomed to, older persons use, for example, pension payments. Those are now being used in terms of electronic sources, as well as the challenge that some persons have with physical payments being done through electronic sources. So we want to be able to manage those situations well. So there are some important actions that individuals and families can make. I mentioned earlier the whole thing about having that family talk, discussing with the family from the outset. We recognize what is happening with the person, to have that discussion about what the future can look like, what it may look like. Make certain decisions about home care, make decisions in terms of care services and the different costs that will be involved. In terms of financial institutions, they can also play a role in the process if it is that you recognize persons coming to your facilities or even online and they're undertaking erratic transactions, unusual behavior, withdrawal of large amounts of money or frequent withdrawals, as well as strange persons accompanying this person to the bank that, you know, the person go and you can make a definitive family connections. As financial institutions, you also want to pick up on that in terms of what is happening. So in terms of our summary, some key takeaway points, it's important to recognize that as the condition progresses, the person loses their capacity to make decisions. So it's very important that issues relating to finances, relating to estate, for example, that those are discussed and resolved early. Also, you want to be able to identify your financial proxy, your power of attorney, and all of that. And you want to use all the available financial resources around you to make that money, that limited income stretch to be able to address all the common cost needs that persons experience as they go through the situation. All right. I thank you so much for listening, and I hope it would have helped you through this process. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for that, Julian. Thanks for adding that dimension to the discussion. Money matters, eh? And you know, we really can't ignore these. We are going to be hearing from no questions? No questions. Right, so we're going to be hearing from Dr. Sharon McKenzie in a moment, and then we're going to have a final question and answer section. So I know people might have concerns or questions to raise with Dr. McCoy Davis, and we'll take those at the end. Dr. Sharon McKenzie holds a PhD in education with emphasis in therapeutic recreation and gerontology from the University of Minnesota. As a certified therapeutic and recreation specialist, she uses various modalities including reminiscence and life review, guided autobiographic groups, and movement and dance as therapeutic venues for improving the life or quality of life of all aging adults. She's a certified Alzheimer's disease and dementia care trainer and a certified dementia practitioner. She was here recently in Jamaica with us while she was on sabbatical from her university. And during that time, she volunteered with Alzheimer's Jamaica and also taught at UWI's social work program, or in the UWI social work program. So we're sort of welcoming her home in a sense. So Dr. McKenzie is going to talk to us about self-care, taking care of you. Sharon?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, okay. For some reason, the video is not kicking in. As the host has to give me permission for the video. Okay, so while we're waiting for the video to kick in, I'm going to share my screen. I just want to say I am so, I feel very privileged to be a part of this panel. Dr. Elda Maya, wonderful, wonderful. I so enjoyed your presentation. And Ms. Ferguson and Dr. McCoy, such a pleasure.
You can go ahead and share your video now.
Okay, let's see if it will work. Ah, there we go. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Now we're dealing with technology. Okay, are you able to see it? Are you seeing the screen? Hello?
No, we're not.
No, okay, hold on.
I can see you.
Again, it's saying that it's the host disabled, the participant screen sharing, so I'm not able to share. And while we're waiting, I want you to listen to this presentation. So how many of you remember this?
Go ahead
Did
now.
it go? Oh, can you see the screen now?
Yeah, could you restart screen share, please?
Okay.
You were seeing you now.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Okay. So, I wanted to start with this children's song, whether it's singing "Young Girl in the Ring," "Cha la 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 la," "Young Girl in the Ring," and I substitute "young girl" for "brown girl" because there are sometimes that people are offended by "brown girl." Brown girl in the ring, cha la 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 la. She looks like a sugar in a plum, plum plum. Show me emotion, cha la 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 la. Show me your motion, cha la 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 la. Show me your motion, cha la 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 la. She looks like a sugar in a plum, plum plum. You know, a lot of times, you know, as we grow old, as we get older, that we forget about fun. We forget about pleasure. We forget about play. And we get so caught up in the seriousness of life. And even, you know, as we're caring for our loved ones, you know, we think about the day-to-day things that we have to help and to take care of. And we aren't necessarily thinking about the moments when things are just enjoyable or fun. So I wanted to just start with this today, that we've heard, you know, about the diagnosis, we've heard about what the prognosis looks like. We've talked about the finances. We've talked about, you know, in terms of having a will and so on. And so I wanted to lighten it up a little bit, right? So let's talk about what it means to have fun, what it means to bring pleasure in our lives, what it means to bring enjoyment. Because even though someone is living with dementia, somebody's living with Alzheimer's, that they can still enjoy life, that it's about living, right? And it's not, as I think it was Ms. Ferguson that said, that, you know, it's not a death sentence, right? This person may live with dementia for another 10, 15, 20 years, right? So, you know, we need to think about how we can engage the individual. And then also in terms of the caregiver, that they're caring for themselves. I wanted to just go just a general, you know, we think about well-being, right? If we're talking that we should be well, you know, we talk about general well-being, that it's an active process, right? So if this person is in the early stage, whether they're in the middle stage or the later stage, it's still active, right? And especially in the earlier stage, we should be providing opportunities for people to have choices, to be able to still make choices for themselves, right? And to be able to hold on to some semblance of identity. And so whatever it is that we do, we really, I believe, should think of dementia care from a holistic wellness perspective, right? We want to think more as the whole is greater than the sum of the part. So focusing on the person's abilities, focusing on the things that work, focusing on promoting resiliency in that individual, right? So that there's meaning in their lives. We want to meet that individual, the person, where they are, right? So if they're in the later stage, but they can still remember something like Brown Girl in the Ring, or they are able to remember, you know, by you showing them a picture, right? Be able to trigger some kind of memory, you know, or go through a family album and remember some of the pictures and so on. That this is what's going to validate who they are. If they are, I think it was Dr. Eldermeyer shared that talked about the fact that, you know, don't correct them, right? So if they're telling you about some story that happened, you know, when they were younger, or they're saying, you know, my sister, she's standing right there, you know, you can have a conversation. Well, what is she saying, right? A lot of times when the person with dementia is, you know, might be aggressive or they're agitated or so on, and they're talking and telling you something that happened years ago, sometimes it might be that there's something going on. They're not able to articulate to you how they're feeling at the moment, but that's their best way of doing it. So you listening to the story that they're telling you might give you some hint that, you know what, maybe they're uncomfortable, that maybe, you know, something's going on, that they're hurting, right? So we kind of need to validate where the person is and what they're saying to us, right? So that we can try to read and understand, are they uncomfortable, or they just they're just actually seeing their loved one, right? So it's a matter of acknowledging and being in the moment with the person. Is it stressful as a caregiver? Yes, it is. We acknowledge that. And so what I say to you is, then you should take care of yourself. So meaningful leisure activities is most important both for you as the caregiver and for the person who has dementia. And I wanted to say, just showing the definition, doing to most people is synonymous with being alive, right? So we have to continue. If that person is bed bound and they're not able to now do things for themselves, and you are primarily doing everything for them, but there's still a way to be able to stimulate the person, whether it's with music, whether it's with just reading to them, right? Or whether it's connecting them with their grandchildren or other family member, that you're still acknowledging that they are there, that they are alive, and that they matter, that they matter. So I wanted to just share some of the differences in terms of when we think about activities, because sometimes we think that, I need to just do leisure activities with the person. Well, no, there are different types of activities, right? You can do productive activities. And I always, tell my students that if the person's in that middle stage of dementia, or they're moving towards a later stage of dementia, you can do productive activities with them, right? You can make them feel like they are part of the daily process, right? What is productive activity? Well, it could be that, you're washing the clothes and you need to put the clothes out on the line. So you take that person out with you and get them to help you to do that. You might be cooking something and you're worried about their safety. So then put them at the table and get them to help you to cut things up, right? Or if you're uncomfortable with them working with the knife, give them something. So that way they are assisting you, right? And that way they are actively engaged in what is important in the family and in what you're doing. It could be that you decide, okay, well, I just want to have fun with this person. I want to sit down. Laughter is so healing, both for you as a caregiver and for the person. So being able to come up with some jokes and, being back when I was able to come back to Jamaica, to be able to sit and to listen to some of the stories that, one of the elders that was in the neighborhood where I was staying, to be able to laugh, right? So, coming up with jokes or, remembering some old time stories that you can share with the person. Doing, some painting or some kind of leisure activity, right? It could be that you want to be able to do some self-care activities with the person. So in the morning when they're up and, they have to tie their shoes or they have to get dressed, instead of you, rushing them to do those things, then, put it in your time. So that way, maybe for one of the activities of daily living or the things that you have to do with them, that they're able to do with you and to do for themselves. So again, you're promoting independence in that person. Also with restorative rest and restorative types of activity. It might be, well, now in Corona, most of us are not going physically to the church, but being able to sit through, a church service online, or praying together, or just sitting outside and listening to nature. One of the wonderful things that I was able to do when I was in Jamaica, especially when the country got locked down, literally sitting outside and watching the roosters and the chicken and how they move, right? That is something that you can sit and just have a conversation with the person. Look at what the chicken them doing. Look at the baby chicks. You see them, right? So simple things. that would be considered as restorative because it's feeding you, it gives you a break as the caregiver, but also it's engaging that person with dementia. So when you think about activities, you think of all the different areas, whether it's a physical or cognitive, emotional, social, spiritual. Those are all the areas that you want to think about. So one of the, Montessori's approach is that we talk about never give a person busy work, right? So again, as you spend your day and you plan your day out, that you give them things that matter. So it's, you choose, you might be doing where we're doing some productive activity, or we're doing, some maintenance type of activity. You make a decision so that it doesn't seem like you're just keeping them busy, but they actually can, feel like they are helping you, that they're assisting you. Activities should be interesting and meaningful. You always want to provide choice because, again, you're letting that person feel for the moments that they can remember that they have a choice, that they matter, right? And that there's some purpose behind whatever it is that they're doing. So let's focus on you now, the caregiver. What about you? What about your health? You, the caregiver. Is your health balanced? And in what areas? Is your health balanced physically? Are you going to the doctor? Are you really being honest and listening to your body? These are things you have to do from a psychological perspective. Are you being mindful that, you know what? I am having a hard time today. Maybe I need to call someone and just talk this through, right? From the intellectual perspective, are you, if you don't know, are you like, well, you're here in this webinar. So obviously you're interested in learning more, so are you continuing to learn? Are you engaging socially with your friends? Are you reaching out, right? Did you stop doing some of the things that you used to do? Are you reaching out to whatever social group? Dr. Eldermeyer talked about the importance of a support group. It is so important so that you can hear that others are going through the same thing that you're going through. And so you have others to give you advice, give you ideas, and so on. Do you have a spiritual practice? And I'm not talking religion. Do you have a practice where you're able to sit quietly and center yourself, right? Do you have a way of doing this? And in what areas is it not in balance, right? Because you need to bring balance. You cannot continue to give out, to give, to give, to give, because eventually you're going to get replenished. You're going to be exhausted, right? And so you need to figure out a way to be able to build yourself up again. I love this video, and please allow me. So this really, and the social workers in the group will appreciate this. My point, caregiving requires support, right? So if you are the only person caring for this individual with dementia, then reach out, right? Reach out to family, reach out to your community, reach out to your neighbor, you know, you can't do it alone. You cannot do it alone because eventually it's going to impact on your health. So you need to reach out and get support from others. And like Dr. Eldemeyer Share said, you know, join a support group. Okay, excuse me. So please take the time, right? So at this moment in my life, am I proud of myself? Think about it. You are given, right? And you are exerting all of this energy. So feel proud of yourself. Pat yourself on the back for doing a good job. Sometimes we don't do that, right? Be thankful. Be thankful that you are able to show up for this person that you're caring for, that you're loving, that you're doing your all, right? You've decided that I do not want to put my loved one into an institutional setting. So I'm going to do the best that I can to care for this person, right? Still look forward to life, right? Because there is life, right? You have to think about things that's joyous to you. So as you're caring for the person, that you're also doing things that's fulfilling for you, right? If I had the support of it might be that you don't have the support of the family, but you can reach out to others to be able to give you whatever it is that you need. I wanted to ask you, are you resting at night? Because maybe the responsibilities that you're carrying during the day, you're not resting as well. So there are many things that we can do, right? So that we can be restful. And that is taking a nice shower, for those of us who have hot water and be able to, enjoy taking a shower. Taking naps during the day. For caregivers, take the time to just bring it down and rest for a little bit during the day. There are different things that you can do. Go take a walk, right? So that you can improve your sleep, that you can rest better. Physical exercise is important, right? You want to make sure that you take the time to walk. If it's even just to walk around your neighborhood, right? And for those of us who have cars, one of the beautiful things about Corona is that, for me anyway, it's been a pleasure. Instead of hopping in my car to go to the corner store, I now walk to the store, right? So thinking about doing things physically so that you are able to stay, healthy. Make sure that you're stretching. Simply just standing, on a desk or a table, and stretching your legs and stretching your back. Just doing simple stretches. It's going to help you. It's going to trigger endorphins, so that way you can feel better and it will energize you. I love, and my folks in Jamaica know I'm a proponent of vision boards. I use vision board for myself. I think as a caregiver, it's a good thing for you to use, to think about using, and also use the vision board and create that for you and your loved one. You can think about things from the past. You can think of special occasions. If you have pictures, you can come up with affirmations that you can put on the board, right? Or inspirational words. You can have pictures of the family, or you and your loved one can create poems together or write little sayings together, whatever. The sky is the limit. But make this board, so that both of you can share the activity, or you also can create your own board about what you envision for yourself, right? Use your imagination, because vision boards, it stimulates something in us when we're able to visualize what it is that we want for ourselves. That it basically tricks the brain, right? Because the brain doesn't really know whether it's, it doesn't, I forgot the part of the brain that's triggered, right? So this is a wonderful activity that you can share with your loved one, as well as doing for yourself. So reduce stress level, stay positive. Our mindset, the way we think about life, the way we think about things, especially during this time, it's important for us to live in the moment and just be kind to ourselves. Sometimes I just hug myself, right? You need to hug yourself. Again, pat yourself on the back, right? And create opportunities where you have a peaceful retreat at home with yourself, with your family, with the person that you're caring for. Again, I cannot stress enough. Don't do this alone. Ask for help. Ask your family, ask friends. Sometimes you just need a break. It's important to take respite time for yourself. Even if it means just for an hour every day, you make arrangement that somebody shows up for you just so that you can have a break, right? Take things one day at a time. And there are days when it might be challenging and you may need to just take a moment at a time. Again, eating well, exercising, all of the lifestyle things that we know that we need to do, because you're providing care. If you're not doing these things, then it means your health is going to be affected, and then you will not be able to provide care. And you'll be forced to make some decisions that you don't want to make. Get your rest at night. Take naps during the day if you can. I'm a big proponent of baths and showers, hot showers. So that's why I have that there again. And remember that all of these things that I have for you, you can actually do with family members and the person with dementia. So as Alzheimer's Disease International suggests on their website, be physically active, follow a healthy diet, challenge your brain, continue to learn, continue to push yourself. As you're reading something that you're learning, you could read it out loud so that person that you're caring for can be a part of that. Look after your heart and enjoy social activity. Do not block your friends away, because if you continue to learn and then share with those individuals what you've learned about dementia, what you've learned about Alzheimer's type or cardiovascular types of dementia, that you can share with those people. So you're educated as you're going along and experiencing having to care for someone. All right, so we've talked a lot. And I always believe that we need to practice what we speak, what we preach. So I want you to take a deep breath through the nostrils and blow out through the mouth. Close your eyes. Deep breath in through the nose. Blow out through the mouth. This time I want, when you take a deep breath in, that you blow out and push everything out with your stomach expanding like a balloon. Breathe in. Blow out. Ladies and gentlemen, that simple act of taking a moment to breathe can bring us back into ourselves, release any stressful situation that's going on, and it's almost like a reset. It's a reset button. And especially during this time where we're wearing masks and stuff, oh my God, be able to take the mask off and breathe, because we are made of the breath of life. So I thank you. I want to remind you, build bonds, continue joy and passion between each other, love yourself, love others, because what's needed in this world is love. And bring the young people in, because they need to know and understand that without the older adults and the older generation with their wisdom, that they will not be able to continue to the next generation without them. So with love, we can move mountains. And so this is the message I leave with you. Thank you.
You have the questions ready, right? Miss Annie, just help you.
So all of that was.
Thank you so very much for that, Dr. Mackenzie. Thank you for teaching us those little gems about how to pause, how to take some time for ourselves, because it's important for us to refresh so that we can refresh others. Thank you so very much. We have some questions coming in online. I'm going to ask Annie just to read those for us, and she will tell who the questions are for.
This is for Prof. Cheryl, and it's from Miss Beckett. She says, good morning. I heard you mention a blood test can be used to help diagnose dementia. What blood test is used for this diagnosis?
Thank you very much for your question. The blood test that I was referring to was a blood test to the diagnosis of dementia is actually one of exclusion. So what you have to do, dementia is not the only disease or illness that can cause memory loss or be associated with confusion. And the blood test that I was referring to was that you rule out all the other things. There's no blood test for dementia per se, but we can make sure there's no sugar, we can look at the B12 levels. Because of our older population, we can still see tertiary syphilis. So the blood test is to look at the other parameters and to make sure there's nothing there.
This next question is also for you again. Ms. Lana Osbands says, good morning. Thank you so much for this session. What is evidence-based literature? What is the evidence-based literature on alternative therapy for dementia? For example, high dose of vitamin E and C or herbal remedies advertised by reputable health stores.
Thanks, Dr. Husbands. There's a lot of anecdotal information. So far, I am not aware of evidence-based that is actually proving that any of these work. The evidence that we have is that some of them, the St. John's wort, etc., can actually be harmful. That said, things like the vitamin E is going to help, in other words, in terms of some of the cholesterol management, etc., but not and I guess too, some of the herbal ones can help in calming somebody, etc. But evidence as to the fact that they reduce or treat it, no, I have not come across any.
Okay. Final question for Prof. Is dementia, Alzheimer hereditary?
No, it is not. No, it is not, but because it has predisposing comorbidities such as hypertension, diabetes, etc., you can have more than one member of a family that will manifest. But there is no gene that has been found. Because we in the Caribbean, and I can actually say the Caribbean, because the data is coming out of both Jamaica and Trinidad, vascular continues to play a very prominent role. In Trinidad, it's a lot of the cases. And we know that Trinidad has a problem with vascular, that they have more heart attacks than most of the Caribbean. In Jamaica, we now know that we have 33% of our cases that are totally vascular, which is significantly higher than the international figure of 22 to 25%. In addition, 50% of our cases of Alzheimer's also had vascular, which will make it more severe and will make it progress rapidly. Why am I harping on this? Vascular disease is preventable. So at least 40% of our problem is preventable, but that means midlife intervention. But it's never too late. So anybody over 60 can start looking at their cholesterol, can make sure they take their medication if prescribed, and can step up physical activity. The key to reducing dementia in the region is prevention.
Okay. Well, let me say thank you. We do have somebody who will formally move the vote of thanks, but for my own thanks, I would like to give to you guys for being such a good audience, for sticking with us, for posing questions, and we're very happy that we could come together to be with you all this morning, and that we could have put together, that's what I wanted to say, this little initiative. So I'm going to ask.
For the vote of thanks, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Sure.
One of the things that we'd like to do from the Aging Center and from social work is we would like this to be the start of a dialogue. And therefore, as you digest what we have said, as you go through your daily life, send us your questions. Now, I'm not the one that's going to be able to tell you just where to send them. So between the two techies over there, they will need to tell you where. Annie, you need to listen so that you can answer them. You need to tell them where. I have just invited them to continue this dialogue with us as we go through, giving us their suggestions, giving us their experiences, and asking questions. Where would they do that?
So we're on Facebook at UEMAWC. You can find us there. We can continue the conversation there. And through the Facebook page, you will see other avenues to reach us. So you will see our email. And Alzheimer's Jamaica, they're so easy to find on the internet. Just literally Google Alzheimer's Jamaica and their website will pop up. You'll get everything there. You can there. And it's now in the chat, so you can just check the chat for those links. All right, guys?
I think one of the most important things to come out of this for it to be worthwhile is that we continue this as a support group of the caregivers. That some are academics. I noticed some of our students are on, but this is a very good medium to continue the discussion.
Yes, indeed. All right, so
I was asking my students to do the vote of thanks. I don't think they want to say anything.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to ask Carleen Elliston to do the vote of thanks for us.
Not there. Okay. All right. No? Tell me when you're wait for them to wait for me. All right, so I'm not Carlin, as you would know. My name is Sandra Latibadier, and I want to say, you can see me dancing. Anybody knows when I'm excited and happy, I dance. And I feel this was a wonderful start. And Prof, thank you for saying that. I think we need to continue the conversation. So let me raise the vote of thanks. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us. Prof, as always, you have been exceptional, practical, simple. People understand. I've been getting feedback. Oh, Prof, wonderful presentation, understandable, practical, and so on. So, Prof, thank you. Dr. Julia McCoy Davis, thank you so much again for the practical presentation on money management. If we never understand money, we understand it now, and we understand the sources. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dundee Ferguson, founder and chair, thank you for your legal mind and for lending your support to this webinar. Oh my word. Dr. Sharon Mackenzie, thank you, thank you. You are a woman of our soil, even though you're not here with us physically. We thank you, thank you, thank you. And for you all for joining us, our teachers, our nurses, our students, our persons living with the disease, all of you, thank you for joining us. And I cannot, not my best, Dwayne. Oh my God, we could not have done this without you. Not to mention Annie and Ezeka Watkins. Oh, my practicum student, I'm a big up social work. No, she's my social work practicum student, and she did an excellent job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. No, she getting her A. I can't say that on here. She didn't know that, but she's getting her A. She did absolutely fantastic. Caroline, thank you for your backup support. And again, Dwayne, we could not have done it without you. We love your IT support. We love the fact that we could call you morning, noon, and night through Anazika, of course. But thank you, and thank you again. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to another set of discussions as we continue to talk about dementia. Have a wonderful afternoon, one and all.